You got any weird stretches you want to do before the?
I don't do any stretches.
You don't do any stretches. You don't do that. No.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
Yes, I do that
Yeah.
sometimes.
People were commenting on it last time. So I'm still Josh,
I am still Danny.
the Danny.
Why is this mic
Yep.
stand so low, Josh? We've been over
I'm not
this.
sure.
It's fine.
So today we want to talk to you guys about responding versus reacting, and how there are two ways that we will deal with stuff that like kind of flares up, or emotions, or different things, and
Really.
everything. Yeah, but they're two very different ways of dealing with the situation, and keeping it kind of short, biblically, and then we'll kind of talk through like what that actually looks like. But there's so many verses on how the Lord responds, how the Lord reacts, how the Lord does both. But the one in Proverbs 16:3 is kind of where I want us to stick to. Is Proverbs 16:3 says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans." So, whatever we're doing, however we're responding in a situation, if we've already pre-committed it to God, or are approaching it from a godly perspective, that will guard our hearts, and that will guard our response in how we do it. Because for a lot of stuff going on, and I'm sure you can kind of, anybody with a pair of working eyes or ears is going to be able to understand, like, there's a lot of stuff going on right now where people are in this constant cycle of reacting, and we're reacting to everything. And we hear a news story and it's horrible, what we're reading. There's nothing good in the article, so we'll react to it and we'll get frustrated. And instead of looking into it more, or figuring out all the facts before we do that, when we do that, that's actually responding to where we're not just avoiding it or forgetting about it or pretending like it doesn't exist. We're actually looking at the whole thing, looking at things in whole context, and not just being upset with something that just happened. And some of it is we live in a day and age where everything is available like 24/7, and there's like instant stories that are breaking. So in some cases, I mean, I remember years and years ago, it was like there was people that were at the mall when the shooting was going on, and they're seeing it all live. Like they're calling their family, or talking about this, and there was a lot of confusion because you're in a huge mall and stuff's going down, and you don't know what's going on, what's accurate, until unfortunately a few days later, when stuff starts to come out, you start to realize, okay, this went on. And so then we're able to respond and be like, okay, this shouldn't have happened, or this went wrong here. And the response is more appropriate to what happened. Mm-hmm. And if we're committing it to God, and we're committed to loving one another, our response is going to be guided and guarded by that love of Christ. And so we're going to look at things, whether it's totally wrong and from the pit of hell and should never happen again, versus things that maybe we thought were just awful, but then getting full context later, we're like, oh, maybe I overreacted, or I reacted poorly to something. And then we kind of start backpedaling into this like justification, where we're like, and I've done this so many times when I get mad about something and I overreact, I then start to justify, well, you shouldn't have said it that way, or well, you shouldn't have done this, or well, and it's like, okay, no, I can't do that. And if I approach it more with the response and seeking to respond, I might take the same amount of time, maybe a couple minutes, just to think about like, okay, what's actually going on here. Then I'm guided by my commitment to loving God and responding in love, and not just this blind rage. So,
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
No, I think that's definitely spot on. I think with respond versus react, you can't if something happens, you cannot just within that moment. If you don't stop to think about it, you are reacting, and I think that's important to realize, is that you have to, before whatever it is, you have to stop yourself, like you said, and consider. Maybe it's a minute. I don't know. maybe for you it's even 30 seconds, like even 20 seconds, even 15 seconds. If you stop and you think about like, okay, how am I, like, how am I? How am I doing this? What am I going to say? That's all of a sudden now so much better than just they said this or they did this. And now because of that, my body's human reaction is to do this, right? Just that, like I keep going down. Maybe it's even 10 seconds, right?
Yeah.
It can be the difference between a really bad situation and a situation where, whether it be you did the right thing, you left them with an impression that they weren't expecting, that's going to now leave a lasting impression. Or, I mean, in a lot of cases, it can save you a lot of time, a lot of hassle, a lot of money, and just like all these things that I have so many examples in my life where, and even just like little things growing up where you see it so clearly that a response is kind of like, if you do something bad, okay, like as a kid say, you have two options in that moment. Mom, I did this. Here's why. I'm sorry. Please help me fix it, which is obviously the one that has taken me a lot of time to get to. And unfortunately the more common one, which is, I didn't do that. Must have been this person or this person. And I have an incident in my life where that happened, and it was great until they found out, and then the person that I framed found out, and it just wasn't good. Granted, so like 12-year-old me, just not good situation.
Not the best.
But an important lesson in that if I had thought it through, I would have hopefully, done the right thing there, and it would have saved me so much trouble, so much anxiety, just the whole thing. So,
and the thing too I want to talk about a little bit is there is a place for both, right? So if I just kind of like haul off and punch you, right? You didn't really, well, you kind of reacted, right? But now your body kind of flinches up or whatever. And if you're in a situation where you're physically fighting somebody or you're competing in sports, it's, you have, I mean, some of it, it's part of the game where we're gauging each other's reactions, and there's a battle of wits, and it's in a lot of ways
play
it can
poker
be,
is what I'm hearing you say.
it can be entertaining, really. Sure. When you're looking at somebody else's reaction and you're trying to like, okay, we're gonna push this button.
Casino
whatever.
Royale comes to mind. He's like sitting across from the guy, and they're like trying to read each other.
Yep. But where we find wisdom is when we're socially and in a lot of ways even ethically responding to things that are happening, sometimes in the same amount of time. It's not necessarily the time factor. Yeah. It's what is the angle to where I would argue, I think most reactions are self-defense and self-preserving and kind of like, hey, don't do that. Yeah. Hey, don't mess with my stuff. Hey, don't call me that. Hey, don't say this, or hey, don't hit me, or hey, hey, yeah, right back to you. Versus a response is, what's really going on? Why? What's the meaning behind this? Or what did you mean? Maybe a follow-up question, or hey, I can tell that you're really hurting about this. Like, how can I help? How can I be part of the solution? And not oftentimes when we react, we become part of the problem. Yeah. Because we just pour gasoline on something that was already on fire. And that doesn't help. Right. And I think as Christians, we're called to a higher standard to where we're committing our ways to the Lord. He's the one calling the shots, and he's saying love. He's saying give mercy. He's saying, these things that we really can't do on our own. And I think the believer that's truly Holy Spirit filled is going to constantly be responding to different things that come in their life, but they're not going to be reactionary to where you can't rattle their cage. There's this inner peace.
I think a lot of it too is kind of conditioning yourself based on what you believe to react a certain way. And then it kind of in a way becomes more like you kind of condition yourself to almost respond instead of react. You said like self-defense, right? It's kind of like, how most people's first reaction when a ball is being thrown at their face is to block it. Now you can train yourself to catch it instead. Sure. Right? That's what football players, they have to do that.
That's really good.
But so it's like within that, you kind of see the parallel in your own life. It's like when you were little. My for me personally, my first response when someone, called me a name or did something wrong to me was, how can I do it back to them, but like 10 times worse? And that was how I rolled. And it took me a long time to kind of be like, okay, A, why is this wrong? Okay, and B, how do I fix it?
Yeah.
And then now start that process.
Yeah.
Because I had an extremely short fuse for years. And like that came out on my siblings, that came out on my parents. And it was through years of being around the right people, doing the right things, staying active in the word and putting the right things into my mind.
Yeah.
That kind of allowed me to slow that down. And now it's like, and I actually never really thought about it like that until now, but it's like, yeah, I'm now very much more, reactionary versus, responsive versus reactive. Like when one does something to try to piss me off, it's like, I'm so much better about it. And so like, it is possible. Definitely.
Yeah. And the argument that I would make for that is that helps you be that much more well-rounded. That helps you be that much more approachable. That helps you be so much more of a better ambassador of who we're supposed to be representing, and that's Jesus, to where there was a lot of things and a lot of times, all the people that harassed Jesus, for the most part when he was on earth, they were trying to get a reaction. They were trying to provoke him to do something that would make him look stupid or slip up or, whatever. And instead, oftentimes Jesus would, even with the woman that was caught in the act of adultery, that was probably the most popular one that people will go to when they're looking at, like, oh man, a prime example of the religious leaders at the time, the people trying to trap Jesus and get him to say something that, oh no, we gotcha now, like, what do you think should happen? And just brilliant, where Jesus in that moment, he didn't react. He didn't freak out and be like, how dare you, don't bring me into this kind of thing. He sits there and, or squats there, whatever. Like he's just like hanging out, doodling in the dirt. And really there's lots of different theories and different people that will say, oh, maybe he was writing down names or maybe he was doing this, whatever. Regardless of the fact, he wasn't saying anything.
He was chill.
He was thinking, he was praying, he was asking God, his Father, like, okay, what's going on here? What's really going on here? And he responded, and his response is brilliant, and it dumbfounds everybody listening. They're like, I wasn't expecting that. He did that with taxes. He did that with sin. He did that with people that were like, what should happen to this person? What should happen to this person? He was constantly connected to the Father through faith, through his actions, through his reactions to things, his emotional response to things were under that submission to God. And so when he responded, he wasn't responding blandly or like, this is my response to the problem. There was a heartfelt, it was a heartfelt like, no, or no, this is what needs to be done, or the kingdom of heaven is like this, or this kind of stuff, where it was powerful, it was moving, and people saw that. And I think that if more people saw us as believers responding to the issues today, responding to people's heart, and really addressing this stuff head on and not just reacting, and this might come on a little cringy, but I'm going to say it and then say I love you. But hashtags don't solve problems. Like they bring awareness to it, but a lot of times people will hashtag something and it's a reaction. It's like, go do something about it. Respond to it by stepping up, by helping out, by being present, by asking those that are being hurt or oppressed or whatever, like, how can I help?
And can I say, just like interject there with that, hashtags don't solve problems. Also, when you react with something like that, the problem with that can be is like you said earlier, you don't have context, and that's why with a response, you're like, okay, what is this? What am I actually putting out there? What am I actually supporting when I put this out? And so by responding and doing your ample research, like that kind of obviously prevents that. And also how you were saying earlier, you were talking about obviously the response versus react. With that, it's like knowing what you're about and being confident with it, that is kind of at least in my mind, and maybe I'm just I don't know what I'm talking about, but it seems like if you know what you're about and you're confident in it, you will respond a certain way because of that. It's like you're not just like, wait a minute, I feel like this right now, so I'm gonna respond or react like this.
Yeah,
it's like no. And like with Jesus, he knew what he was about. Like he was the closest to the Father. He knew exactly why he was on earth. He knew exactly what he had to do. And so I would like to think that in a lot of ways that was kind of where his response came from. Is that he knew.
Yeah.
It's like he had everything laid out. Like so he could pull from that to respond versus
exactly.
Okay, what am I going to pull from right now to react?
He wasn't blindsided by anything. He wasn't like, oh, I didn't see that coming, or I didn't know how to handle this. Next week, we're going to be talking about convictions, and I think that's another key piece to this, where when we have good, solid convictions of, I will not, ... I will, ... and have those things guiding us, those convictions are going to help so much with our response, because if we are convicted, no, I will love, regardless of if they deserve it, regardless of it, what it costs me, regardless of all that, like I will love like Jesus loves me, that he actively loves me, and so I'm going to actively love with that same kind, not an imitation, but like the same kind. That is going to overwhelmingly change how people receive our responses to things, because a lot of times a lot of people don't like conflict. I don't like conflict. If things start getting tense, it makes me uncomfortable, right? But we still have to respond, and we still have to choose, and the convictions that we have on things, those are going to be some of the key things that guide how we do that. Right. And because really, sometimes a reaction is you walk away, you leave. Yeah, that's a bad reaction. If somebody is like, dude, I was just pouring out my heart, or I was just getting really frustrated, or I was just about to make my point, and you leave, like that's a bad reaction. But same thing if you get really mad and you start cussing them out and you start throwing things and being a kid about it, it's like, okay, that's not a good reaction either. Yeah. And oftentimes responding looks initially like that. Right. You're taking in what's going on.
That is just that in itself. That response when someone is cussing you out or saying something that they know you don't agree with, when that's your initial response, that in itself speaks so much. Like it's like with Jesus just drawing in the same, like he was chill, he was calm, and you doing that has a similar effect. Like them just seeing you keeping your composure, and they know, they're like, oh no, he's actually thinking about this. He's going to say something actually, that actually has some root to it. Yeah. Opposed to me, who was just spewing stuff. Yep. And so I'm not saying you should want to win every argument you're in, but you will essentially. Not like in the sense like, oh, I beat you, but like you will walk away knowing, hey, no, I did the right thing. I don't feel bad about that.
And you might even be able to. That's the other thing too. When we respond instead of react, it also gives us a chance to learn something, because we might be dead wrong on something, and somebody is having a really bad reaction to it and be like, I that is it. I have had enough, And we talked about anger before, where you might be in a situation where you're the fuse and it's about to go boom, and you just said something, you were wrong place, wrong time, whatever, and they're done stuffing it, and you get all of the anger, all of the years of I just can't put up with this anymore. Even in that moment, if you choose to stop and respond, you're going to hear things totally different. They're not attacking you personally. They're not, all this kind of stuff. Like, to let some of that stuff go and give forgiveness is like, okay, that's huge. So I don't know. Yeah. Bottom line that we want to encourage you guys with this week is just in a time such as this. This is a timeless truth, the respond versus react. But in a time like this, we are going to tons of opportunity we can react to everything. We can have an allergic reaction, so to speak, with the stuff that's going on, the stuff that's being talked about, everything like that. Or we can respond to what's going on.
Yeah.
We can read the articles, we can see the stories, we can be involved in people's lives and really get in the trenches of what is really going on. How can I be part of the solution, not part of the problem? How can I bring Christ's love and Christ's peace that's beyond our full comprehension and understanding into a situation, and let God do the heavy lifting? Let God do the convicting. Let God do the stuff that we can't do. But will we be obedient to that? Will we be okay with responding that way instead of just going nuts and losing our minds over this stuff? Like, that is not an appropriate response to some of this stuff.
Which unfortunately we are seeing a lot of.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, and especially with, as like we have a lot of young people in the youth group and all that, it's very easy to react, and I kind of like to think that when I think about, reaction and responding, one's based on emotion, one's based on logic and belief, right? And it was actually on the way to the beach trip, I was talking with Ben about like logical thinking, because we both, and I think you are too, kind of all somewhat logical thinkers.
Sure.
And
I like to think so.
And in a lot of ways, like, there's nothing wrong with being an emotional thinker. In fact, a lot, I think certain people are more in some areas of their life, obviously, versus less in other parts. But when it comes to hot topics and issues, like, we have to be using logic. We have to be using belief. We can't, and that's why I hate the term, or I shouldn't say hate, but it bothers me.
Sure.
The term like follow your heart, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like I'm sure we could go on a whole thing about that, but your heart will tell you in a lot of instances, like, this is the right thing. When have you really looked into it? Have you really thought about maybe it's not?
Yeah.
And now I'm now putting this all onto this. Maybe it's one person, maybe it's a group of people. Using, it could be in person, it could be social media, because that's what my heart told me to do, because that's how I feel as a human from what I just saw. And now it's like, but now you just did that to all of them, and it turns out maybe you weren't as right as you think.
Yeah, and it could actually weaken your argument.
And now it puts you in this really bad place of like, okay, so do I, big up and admit I was wrong and say, okay, here's why? Or unfortunately, I think what I see a lot of right now, especially, is nope. Now I'm pedal to the metal. It's like when you're a little kid, and once you start lying, it's like no matter how blatantly obvious it is, and your mom's like, "No, I basically saw you." You're like, "Nope, it wasn't me." It's kind of like that, and so just like
you have to tell a lie on top of a lie on top of
and
another
just
lie,
and you just look like a fool. So just like use your logic, use your belief. Like so many of the kids watching this, so many people, like you have such a solid foundation, such a solid belief. So really, I guess, pull from that, and like if you're doing that and you're really actually doing that, I think you'll see that every confrontation, every thing you look at, you'll go away from that feeling like, no, this is good, even though maybe they're mad at me.
Yep.
You might have someone genuinely very upset at you, but it's like, if you know that you did the right thing, and God's like, yeah, you did the right thing, and you know that. It is what it is.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
And you can walk away from the situation knowing that you represented God accurately.
Yeah.
So really what this is a call to love. It's a call for all of us that whether we, if we call ourselves Christians, if we're really following Christ, that has to be our primary focus, is how do we love God and how do we love people around us? How do we love our neighbors? How do we really authentically, accurately display God's love for us by how we love other people? That's what we should be known for, and that's what we should be influencing. That's what should be our guiding ideology, or our guiding response to any and every situation. And yes, there's going to be times where we have to react, and yes, there's going to be times where we gotta, if you don't flinch or you don't block, whatever, you're going to get smacked in the face, whatever. And physically, having reactions and that kind of stuff, I totally think that's accurate. But emotionally, I think as Christ followers, we're called to respond to things in a timely fashion. Don't sweep it under the rug, but we gotta do better, and we gotta do it with love.
Yeah.
So, and with that, we love you. Have a fantastic week, And
That's what matters most.
yeah, that's what matters most. Yes. There we go.
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Freaking Aaron just blow up his phone
I
in the middle
know.
of
It's
the podcast.
calling me and like, hey.